looking at the chromosomes, doing DNA analysis. This is all like very, very important. And so with that said, just going to discuss some of the things that we're doing here at Jenkins Arboretum. And so mainly focus on our rhododendron germplasm repository projects. So with over 1,200 species of rhododendron, they hold a significant genetic diversity. So conserving these plants in a botanic garden setting helps protect that diversity and contributes to broader goals of sustaining biodiversity, having resilient ecosystems. And so Jenkins, located just outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, serves as a living repository for these plants that are native to the eastern United States. And the conditions at Jenkins are highly conducive to growing rhododendrons, and other plants in the ericaceous family, which led us to establish a collection of rhododendrons that is now accredited through the American Public Gardens Association Plant Collections Network. And this network coordinates a continent-wide approach to germplasm preservation and promotes excellence in plant collections management. And so Jenkins is one of the 6 public gardens in America that is committed to this long-term preservation of rhododendrons. And we established a rhododendron germplasm repository initiative to focus on the 23 species of rhododendron that are native to the eastern United States. And of course, there are some nuances when defining native and species. So for the purpose of this project, we are broadly defining native as east of the Mississippi, and we use Alan Weekly's dichotomous key, which was published, I believe, in 2023, to define species. And so what we mean by germplasm repository or living collection is that Jenkins is a facility that collects and preserves and even distributes this genetic material for research and conservation purposes. So we have about 4,500 accessioned rhododendrons. 705 of those are native, with 131 being lepidote species and 574 being native azaleas. And so one practical example is these plants can be used for plant breeding. I also, my job as a curatorial assistant, I manage the database in which all this information is held. So information such as the parentage, the provenance information, etc. And even when I was doing research in grad school on rhododendron minus, I used Jenkins as a resource. And so our goal in this initiative aims to exhibit the ornamental value of these plants and preserving these individuals ex situ with unique phenotypic characteristics, such as the ones seen on the screen. So this could be exceptional color or unusual form. And part of the reason we wanted to establish this this project was because many collectors who found really unusual or otherwise exceptional species growing wild, they would collect them, grow them, and they would move or sell off their properties, and the value of these plants would then be unknown or even lost. And so Jenkins is helping to ensure that in instances such as this, the plants can be propagated and added to our collection so that the genetics can again continue to be preserved. And so in 2021, the Jenkins staff went on our first plant exploration trip in the Southern Appalachians to scout and identify exceptional species in the wild. And during this trip, we visited places like Roan Mountain, pictured here, to collect cuttings with special permits. Additionally, we stopped at several native azalea nurseries, and again, with permission, and with permission from private property owners, we collected cuttings from there as well. And so in the picture on the left, that is a picture from Roan Mountain. Just wanted to like capture the beauty of that. But the picture on the right, these plants all came from Roan Mountain. You can see the differences in color, in shape. Some are more yellow with a little bit of peach. Some are smaller. And this is also photos of Roan Mountain. Again, calendulaceum. There were a lot of those as well as rhododendron catavians, and it was just spectacular. There were thousands of plants, and we enjoyed it even in the rain. And so, like I mentioned, a large focus was on rhododendron calendulaceum. And so the picture on the left is a typical rhododendron calendulaceum flower. And then on the right, you can see that we found variations in colors. So there's like a really dark red, almost like a fire engine red. There were plants on white top, which is the top left plant that had like almost like a striping peach. There were some that were they opened yellow and they turned a darker orange, and so we find all these things very interesting. And again, when we collect cuttings with permission, we are careful to document the provenance and other information as well. And we also focus on Rhododendron prinophyllum. Again, on the left is a typical Rhododendron prinophyllum flower. And in dolly sods, we saw specimens with lighter flowers, darker flowers, some with a rusty blotch, while most didn't have a blotch at all. And then also just wanted to point this one out too of rhododendron catabians. Just we quickly pulled off on the side of the road and just like that, the different variation in colors. Again, it's a gradient from like light pink to dark pink. And so, while our recent plant exploration efforts have brought in exciting new accessions and expanded the genetic diversity of our collection, it's equally important to recognize the value of the rhododendrons that we already have established in the garden. And these plants not only represent years of careful curation, but they also serve as a vital part of our germplasm efforts. So I'll start with one that was found growing on the property. This is a selection of Rhododendron paraclimenoides, and it was selected for its nearly white dorsal lobe or upper petal, and it's darker pink, almost purple. It's hard to capture that in a photo, of course, and it blooms slightly later than all of the other Rhododendron paraclimenoides. And so it's currently in the process of being named stiff upper lip, which is why there's a double quote instead of a single quote. The next one is Rhododendron vasei. So on the picture in the top left, we can see that it has an extremely narrow range, and it's located only in several spots in a handful of counties of North Carolina. And it presents typically in various shades of pink, but Rhododendron vasei white find is a pure white selection. And this is Rhododendron canescens fireworks. It's a spider form of Rhododendron canescens. And Alan Cantrell, who is an azalea collector and propagator, knew someone who found this azalea growing on a nearby property. And when he went to visit it, he noticed that it had been run over by heavy machinery, but it was still hanging on. And so he was able to salvage a few sprouts and successfully propagate it. Another one is Rhododendron viscosum Betty Cummins. So viscosum has one of the largest, if not the largest, range in all the native azaleas. And typically, as you can see in the bottom left photo, it's a white flowering plant, and it has, like John Perkins was talking about, it has those glands which make it sticky. Um, and this was discovered by Dave Lewis, and it was along New Jersey road, and he found it near an old toilet seat. And so he had a landmark when it was time to come back and take cuttings, and it was nicknamed Old Toilet Seat until he decided to register it, naming it Betty Cummins to recognize her for her work in propagating and introducing new varieties. Here we have a very similar looking flower, but as John noted, some ID characteristics you can look at whether they have hairs or glands on hairs, etc. Arborescens is known for for lacking those hairs and those glands. And so although these two flowers look the same, this one is very consistent with rhododendron arborescens. So we can see that the typical rhododendron arborescens flower in the bottom, shown in the bottom left, is white with oftentimes with like red stamens. And the photo on the left, this is an unusual dark pink form of rhododendron arborescens located at Mount Davis in Elk Lick Township, Pennsylvania. And this is found in a picnic parking lot, and it's been observed by botanists for years. And the history of how it got there is unknown. I know that the park has been contacted, and they just don't have information about this plant specifically. And so it's currently being in the process of being registered as Rhododendron arborescens Betty after one of the botanist's late wife. And a lighter pink version, also found in that area, is being registered as, I believe, Rhododendron arborescens Carl after the botanist himself. And this one to me is very interesting, and it has um, I like its story. So in the 1930s, a population of about 20 rare crimson red flowered rhododendron maximums called red max was discovered near Mount Mitchell, North Carolina, near the Blue Ridge Parkway. Horticulturist and nurseryman Joe Gable collected and propagated it, with his daughter later naming it Rhododendron maximum Mount Mitchell. And the plant's red traits vary in cultivation. Sometimes it does revert to straight green leaves. I'll show you a leaf of this photo of this plant in a minute. But sometimes the leaves will revert back to green, and the flowers will be either like white or have mixed flowers. So multiple genetically distinct versions were developed, including the cultivars Mount Mitchell, Gables Red, and Delps Red Max. And by 1992, the original Red Max plant in the wild had died, but there was a single red flowered plant remaining on the site. And this is possibly a seedling or a layer, but it has survived thanks to local caretakers. And as I mentioned, I was going to show a picture of the leaf. So you can see that the red kind of almost like bleeds into the leaf. And so I think that it's stories like this that highlight the importance of plant exploration and propagation. And so at the Arboretum, by acquiring and propagating both new and existing plants, many with known provenance, Jenkins has helped ensure genetic redundancy within its own collection. In fact, earlier today, we had a group of volunteers planting about 100 plants in an expansion area that is going to open up very soon. That's the photo on the right. And all these plants came from our plant exploration efforts, as well as collaborating with other gardens as well. So the propagating and sharing of plants is especially important as shifting weather patterns increasingly threaten plant populations. And so threats such as flooding, drought, fire, high intensity winds, etc., threaten collections both in cultivation and also wild populations. So if we go back to the story of Red Max, Hurricane Helene hit that area pretty hard and has or had the potential to eliminate a rare form of Rhododendron maximum. And so, not only due to the plant being like physically destroyed in a hurricane or drastic changes to the landscape, but also access to that population. I mentioned earlier that there are caretakers that go in and they trim around this plant, make sure that it has optimal growing conditions. And so, again, this is just highlighting the importance of plant exploration and germplasm preservation. And on the botanical side of things, Jenkins was hit by a derecho in 2018, and a derecho is a really powerful windstorm. And so this storm brought hurricane force winds that swept through the arboretum, toppling over 100 trees and severely damaging many of the large and most unique native azaleas that we have. And the event just underscores the critical importance of sharing cuttings with other botanic gardens and propagators, because without backups, these genetic materials could be permanently lost. And so, like many public gardens, Jenkins has developed a disaster preparedness plan that includes sharing propagules to safeguard its plant collections. And so these efforts provide a sample of Jenkins' dedication to germplasm preservation and rhododendron conservation. And we're proud to be recognized as a resource for horticultural display, education, research, and conservation. And so please feel free to reach out or visit our website for additional information. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Tara. We have time for a question or two. Raise your hand, put a Q&A, or ask a chat. Oh, we got one. All right, from Alex Fadiga. Do you aim for a certain amount of redundancy in your collection, like a minimum number of plants in your living collection from a given accession?
That's a great question. We do strive to have a minimum of three, and we do that because we feel like three it gives us a little bit of wiggle room if something were to die. But again, that's a minimum, and we typically have more than that. Yeah, that's a great question.
Anybody else? Got time for one more?
So there's a question
In
in
the
the
chat.
chat that says, why limit to species rather than including any plant in a wild population? So we decided to, at least for now, we wanted to start with species. And then once we had a better idea of what that could look like as a germplasm preservation, we may further down the line open it up to some crosses. So I know that there's like, a hybrid swarm near the Gregory Bolt that could be something interesting to look at. But we want to, have a firm grasp on like what species, like what stray species there are, and then we will definitely look at broadening our view on that. So thanks for the question.
Okay, I think we're gonna move on in the interest of time to our next. So we have another poster presentation from Chongsheng Li from the Atlanta Botanic Garden, and they're going